effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay.
You've known since kindergarten that boys don't belong in the girls' room and girls don't belong in the boys' room. You've also known in kindergarten, by the way, the difference between a boy and a girl. So I think that you should take that valuable lesson that your 5-year-old has learned, and you need to send some kind of educational program to members of Congress because they don't know that fundamental truth. It took Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina to introduce a new piece of legislation yesterday, specifically citing that biological men don't belong in private women's spaces. She says, period, full stop, end of story. She had to put a resolution in place so that Congress will adopt these rules to ensure that places designated for women on Capitol Hill, be it restrooms or be it the locker room or the gym or what have you, if it's designated for women, then only women are there. Now, why do we need that law in Congress? Well, because I don't know if you saw this or not, history was made this election day. A glass ceiling was shattered. We have our first transgender woman elected to Congress. This person's name is Sarah McBride from Delaware. And I point out now the reason why we need this law, specifically defining that only biological women can go into the locker rooms and bathrooms, and that should not include transgender women. And I need to point out the fact that transgender women are not biological women. I need to say that because we even have the term transgender woman in our vocabulary. I mean, if transgender women were women, then you wouldn't call them transgender women, would you? You'd just call them women. And history wouldn't be made because no one would care, because some chick named Sarah McBride in Delaware just won an election. But no, Sarah McBride is not just some chick. Sarah McBride is a glass ceiling breaker, shattered that glass ceiling. Sarah McBride made history. Sarah McBride is like Rosa Parks. Sarah McBride is like Jackie Robinson. Sarah McBride gets all of these accolades and is able to raise all this money because Sarah McBride is the first transgender woman. So you're not allowed to have all the boy equipment down there, dressed like a woman, and grandstand as some sort of huge civil rights icon. But then when it comes time to say, well, wait a minute, you're not just a woman, then are you? It's like, how dare you? I'm just a woman. I'm just like Nancy Mace. I'm just like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm just like Nancy Pelosi. Well, if you are, then what ceiling did you really shatter? You see how they like to have it both ways? Well, here's Sarah McBride. And Sarah McBride is very upset that she's not allowed to go hang in the locker room with Nancy Mace. Sarah McBride says everyday Americans go to work with people who have life journeys different than their own and engage with them respectfully. I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. See, you have to have kindness for Sarah McBride, the dude who dresses like a woman who wants to go in the women's locker room and get undressed next to Nancy Mace. But you're not allowed to have any sort of kindness to Nancy Mace, right? That kindness doesn't exist. She doesn't deserve your kindness. Only the dude who wants to invade women's private spaces, that's the person who gets kindness. Sarah McBride goes on, it's a blatant attempt from far right-wing extremists to distract from the fact that they have no real solutions to what Americans are facing. We should be focused on bringing down the cost of housing, healthcare, and childcare, not manufacturing culture wars. Delawareans sent me here to make an American dream more affordable and accessible, and that's what I'm focused on doing, Delawareans. By the way, there's Sarah. That's Sarah right there. Just a few years ago, Sarah was Tim. Now going by Sarah. That's the person who wants to be able to get undressed right next to Nancy Mace, right next to AOC as well. So Sarah says, if I can quote one more time, I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. See, this is about kindness. It's kindness to allow this person right here that you're seeing to now wear their hair long, get dressed up in a mini skirt, and go get undressed next to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Mace. That's kindness. And by wanting to protect Nancy Mace from having to deal with this guy getting undressed and swinging his dong around in the women's locker room, if you want to protect Nancy Mace from having to deal with that humiliation, that's not kindness. No, kindness only goes one way. Here's the thing about Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the military academy in South Carolina, and she's served in the military admirably. She's no blushing flower. I assure you, her time at the Citadel and in the military exposed her to many, many toxic masculine sort of demonstrations. Okay. She's no daisy that needs protecting. All right. It's not about that. There's another thing about Nancy Mace that not a lot of people know. When she was 16 years old, she was sexually assaulted by a man. It seems to me that a woman that has had to go through that trauma and abuse and sexual assault at the hands of a man, I think she deserves the grace to be able to set her own boundaries. And if she's setting her boundaries in a women's locker room and in a women's restroom, maybe we should sort of show some kindness to her and defer. And who knows how many other women who are members of Congress right now who have not courageously stepped forward like Nancy Mace and told her personal story. That it could be my wife, it could be my daughter, it could be my mother serving in Congress right now who has a traumatic experience in her past. And maybe, just maybe, not having to have a naked man against her consent parading around in the locker room next to her named Tim, who now wants to be called Sarah. Maybe we should defer to them. Maybe that's kindness, Sarah. But you know how this story goes. Thankfully, as I mentioned, Nancy Mace, no blushing flower. You don't graduate from the Citadel as the first woman in that institution and then serve in the military without being able to show some cojones yourself. Rhetorical ones, not actual ones like Tim Sarah has. Nancy Mace ain't backing down.
The radical left is calling me an extremist for being a feminist, fighting to protect the rights of women and girls. If being a feminist makes me an extremist or a bigot or a monster, I am totally here for it because I'm going to fight like hell for every woman and every little girl across this country to protect you and keep you safe.
Good for you, Nancy Mace. And yeah, I love the fact that a badass woman like that is redefining and seizing, capturing, reclaiming the word feminist. Because feminists are supposed to stand up for women and girls. And if you're saying this is all politics and they're making just a big deal out of it, it's only one person in Congress deal with it. This sends a message because if Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all of the women in Congress, if they can't defend and protect their own rights to private spaces, then who's going to stick up for that 7-year-old girl in an elementary school who deserves the exact same protections? Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about this, sort of, by the media. They're setting this up as a trap, by the way, but it's not going to work. A trap only works if there's actually, claws attached to it that can cause some pain and inflict harm and damage. But it's like these people weren't paying attention to this last election, and they didn't recognize exactly what time it is in this country. Watch Mike Johnson handle it rather deftly.
Mr. Speaker, is freshman-elect Sarah McBride a man or a woman?
All right, so you heard the question. Is Sarah McBride a man or a woman? You see, it's a trap. And you can see the smirk as Mike Johnson decides to handle the question. And watch how he deftly handles it, because politics is important, and being political is an important skill. Me, personally, I would say, well, I certainly don't define Sarah McBride as a woman. Sarah McBride defines themselves as a woman, and we'll let just the chips fall where they may. But how they define themselves or how I define them is meaningless. It's how science defines them. But let's see how Mike Johnson handles it.
Look, I'm not going to get into this. We welcome all new members with open arms who are duly elected representatives of the people. I believe it's a command that we treat all persons with dignity and respect, and we will. And I'm not going to engage in silly debates about this. There's a concern about the uses of restroom facilities and locker rooms and all that. This is an issue that Congress has never had to address before, and we're going to do that in a deliberate fashion with member consensus on it, and we will accommodate the needs of every single person. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yes, sir.
Do you plan on bringing Nancy Mace's transgender bill and putting that into the rules package?
I'm not going to address the plans on any of that. I just told you what I'm going to say about the issue. I'm not going to engage in this. We don't look down upon anyone. We treat everybody with dignity and respect. That's a principle that I've pursued my whole life, and we will take care of this, issue of first impression for Congress, as we will any other thing. We'll provide appropriate accommodation for every member of Congress.
All right. Now, a lot of people interpreted that as, oh, Mike Johnson isn't going to engage in this, so he's not going to bring the bill and everything. And that would be a misreading of what you just heard from Mike Johnson. What he's saying when he says, I'm not going to engage in this, I'm not going to engage in it, he means there at the podium with the media and with the press. The bottom line is everyone in Congress will be accommodated, but we will also deal with this as a consensus. The majority will rule in the House of Representatives. Sarah, what's the person's name? Sarah McBride. Sarah McBride does not have the heckler's veto. Sarah McBride is not allowed to stand up there dressed as a woman and say, I don't care what everyone says, I'm going to demand what I'm going to demand. No, that's not what time it is. And by the way, Olivia Beavers from Politico, is that right? Olivia Beavers? Beavers, okay. Sure, why not? Olivia Beavers of Politico reported very briefly after that statement from Speaker Johnson. She says, Speaker Mike Johnson told the GOP conference today that transgender women won't be allowed to use the women's bathrooms in the Capitol per two sources. It comes as Rep. Mace puts forward a bill on the matter. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene confirmed this when I asked her about GOP leadership backing up this view. He said there's not going to be any biological men using our restrooms, she said. Nancy Mace says, as you can see down here, this is correct. In fact, Nancy Mace, who has proposed this, spoke to the media specifically about this.
Today and last night for fighting to protect women and girls, it's ridiculous. So if that being a feminist makes me an extremist, I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
Yeah, she said it all. A person with a penis does not belong in the women's room. I want you to picture this. Whatever you care about Nancy Grace, picture your daughter, picture your sister, picture your mother getting ready to work out at the YMCA, and right next to them, fully naked, is a person with a penis. Now, I understand that this is how Sarah McBride presents himself right now. And you know what? I'll be honest. Compared to some other transgender dudes I've seen dressing up like women, this is a little bit more convincing than others. It's not great, but it's more convincing. But here's the thing. When you're naked, there's no fooling anyone. You got what you got. And I don't think my wife or my mother or my aunt or my daughter or my congresswoman should have to be confronted with that reality in their private space. And why is that a controversial position? Because they're coming down hard on Nancy Mace right now. It continued after session on the steps of the Capitol last night.
Not be in the locker room, should not be in changing rooms, should not be in our restrooms either. And I'm going to be standing in the brink, standing in his or her way, putting a stop to this insanity and this nonsense. She doesn't get a say. This is about real women and women's rights. And the far left, radical left, they want to erase women and women's rights, and I'm not going to let them.
Would you want Sarah McBride then to use the men's restroom outside of the changing room?
She was born a biological male. She should use the men's restroom.
How
That's
does
how it
one,
should work.
how would, what's the mechanism for checking who's qualified to use the ladies' room then? Like just sort of generally. Obviously, Sarah McBride has identified herself as a trans person, but what would be the,
Here's the deal. Biological men shouldn't be in women's private spaces, period. End of story.
So this is specifically because Sarah McBride is coming to Congress.
That and more. So, if we can't do it here, we can't do it anywhere. I've been strong on women's rights for several years now, and it's time to make sure that we protect women and girls everywhere. And it doesn't stop here.
You got to be a DC reporter to have to ask a question like that. What would be the mechanism of policing this policy? Well, I don't know, pal. What's the mechanism right now? What's that? They're acting like this is some new revolutionary idea. You know, for right up until about a minute and a half ago, there were men's room and women's rooms. Ubiquitous, everywhere. That's how it's been. You guys come in and you change this all of a sudden 90 seconds ago, and someone draws a line and says, whoa, 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 no. We've always had a men's and a women's room. Men use men's room. Women use women's rooms. We're going to continue to have men's and women's rooms. Well, what exactly is the mechanism for something like that? How exactly do you know? How have we known for the last, I don't know, 10,000 years of humanity on this planet? Nancy Mace was very diplomatic, very political, very assertive, but even afforded Sarah McBride, she pronouns in her interviews. Let's turn to Marjorie Taylor Greene now, who's great. Not so diplomatic, though.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace has a new resolution that would ban transgender women from using the women's bathroom at the Capitol. Is that something that you would support, or like what are your? It's a brand new resolution that was just introduced in the last hour or two.
Oh, gotcha. I support a resolution that keeps all biological men out of women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and private places. Not only here in the Capitol complex, our office buildings, but all taxpayer-funded facilities.
How does one? I guess the logistics question would be: how does one check if someone is qualified to use the ladies' room? Then in that case, obviously there's a new openly transgender member of Congress, but
right, which is
more
a
generally,
man. He's a man. He's a biological male, so he is not allowed to use our women's restrooms, our women's gym, our locker rooms, and our spaces that are specified for women. He's a biological male. He has plenty of places he can go.
Okay, and should they make gender neutral bathrooms? I guess logistically,
No,
what happens
he
if they have
can
to go to the
in
bathroom?
men's room, and he has a bathroom in his office, just like all of us do. And that's where I use the restroom most of the time in my office. If he has a bathroom that'll be designated for him. But men need to respect our spaces. And that's what this election was all about. This was a mandate from the American people that are not only fed up with the open borders, they're fed up with inflation, they're fed up with the economy, but they're fed up with the left shoving their sick trans ideology down our throats and invading our spaces in our women's sports. So sorry for the uncomfortable question, but I'm giving you the direct answer. The American people spoke at the election. They're sick of this shit. And so the new member of Congress that was voted into Congress on behalf of his district in Delaware needs to respect my space, my privacy, and other women's space and privacy, because he is not a woman. So that's my answer.
There you go. He's a man. He needs to respect our space because he is a woman. He is not a woman. And the American people are sick of this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I just want to reiterate. This is who we're talking about. This is who we're talking about. All right. That's Tim McBride in college. And now this is Sarah McBride in Congress. And I recognize that when you look at these two pictures, it's like, well, he doesn't look like that anymore. Different appearance, right? Okay. I suppose. Sure. So is that all it takes? I mean, to coin a phrase, is that what makes a woman a woman? Is that it? That's the entirety of it? Because if so, if I may, with all due respect, you have a pretty low regard for women. If that's all it takes. Long hair, put on a dress, put on some lipstick, maybe even take hormones to grow a pair of boobs. And that's all it takes. That's what makes somebody a woman. Might be old-fashioned, but I actually think there's a lot more to that. A whole lot more. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally take a big old exhale. What a relief. The election's over. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing. And one of the most significant is our national debt. The fact is our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards, and it's not going to be quickly or easily dismantled. So for your own personal finances, the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings, guys. Many things are out of our control, even out of Trump's control, at least in the outset. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. So why don't you talk to the people at Birch Gold Group? Birch Gold Group, they'll help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is this does not cost you a penny out of pocket. Text my name, Larry, to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. Right now, through Black Friday, you're going to receive a free 1 ounce. I don't know. I assume it's about this big. I think it's actually more about this big. You're going to get a free 1 ounce silver eagle. The visual aid really sells it, doesn't it? A free 1 ounce gold silver eagle for every $5,000 purchase with Birch Gold. Text Larry to 989898.